We have some pretty big news on the NHL's return to play plan, including the Hub Cities selections, CBA extension talks, and what's all involved. Of course, we also have some NHL Draft Rumours concerning who the Kings and Wings might take at the 2nd and 4th overall selections, and we might have a senior hockey executive joining the Buffalo Sabres. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to Liberty here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we don't have anything officially announced from the NHL. It's believed that before they make a big announcement, they want to have all of this stuff hammered out and be able to make one big, huge announcement, but all kinds of information is being leaked through NHL insiders, and we have a lot of details that appear to be absolutely confirmed, and I guess we'll jump in here and discuss, and we'll see how accurate this information is when the NHL officially unveils. It's pretty well confirmed by numerous sources that the NHL Hub Cities for the 2020 NHL Playoffs this summer will indeed be Toronto and Edmonton. It will be an all-Canada event. Obviously, Vegas was in the mix and considered a front-running city right up until the last couple of days, and it looks as though the recent spike in COVID-19 cases has certainly scared off the NHL from holding the event in that city. So Edmonton and Toronto were victorious here with getting the rights to hold the event. Toronto will host the East, Edmonton will host the West, and even the home cities will still be included in the hotel bubbles of players so that they're on a completely even playing field in that regard. And of course, since that there's no fans in attendance, I really don't think there's going to be a home ice advantage, so to speak, for any team here, because obviously playing in an empty arena is going to be a whole different experience for many of them. Now, of course, with all kinds of items regarding the CBA extension being discussed back and forth, give and take here, trying to hammer out a deal, but it is believed and been reported by Elliot Friedman and others that the NHL is agreeing to let the players go back to the Olympic Winter Games. So during this extended agreement, there would be 2 Winter Games in 2022 and 2026. Now, of course, that is pending an agreement with the IOC to finalize those details, but there was already a lot of movement on the IOC's part before to try to entice the NHL to have their players come back to those games. So I really don't think that part of it is going to be overly difficult, but looks as though NHL hockey players going back to the Olympics is going to be a for sure thing if this CBA ends up getting ratified. Now, of course, we have several other notes, including the salary cap. We have reports that the salary cap will remain flat for 2 years at 81.5, and then a modest increase of about $1 million in year 3. After that, it's going to be determined, of course, by how everything's going from a league revenue standpoint, and the cap for next year is not necessarily tied to league revenues as well. So certainly an interesting situation. Obviously, this is going to impact the players a fair bit. I think longer term, the players could end up losing a fair bit of money, having to pay back quite a bit here to the owners. Another big part of this is that they were deferred 10% of next year's salary, so that will be deferred back to the owners, which will help them with liquidity and obviously cash flow, and they will get that money back at a later time when escrow is likely going to be lower, which will help them retain a little bit more of the money as well. Speaking of escrow, it's believed that it's going to be at 20% next year, then dropping to about 14% in the second year, and then down again year 3 onward, so they can get it downward and stable for the long-term viability here of the game. Of course, that's a big sticking point here for the players, as obviously they don't get to keep all of that money. So initially here for the players giving 10% back in deferral and then 20% in escrow, there's 30% of their wages already gone right off the top. And of course, they got to pay all their taxes, they got to pay agent fees, etc. They're really not going to be making nearly as much money as everybody thinks. I still don't feel bad for them. They make a lot of money to play a sport in a game that they love, but still, when you look at what they actually make, when you look at the cap friendly and look at all the salaries, it's really nowhere near that what they actually end up taking home. Now, a big part of this as well is there will be language in this agreement which will allow any NHL players to opt out of playing in this summer tournament, just like we saw with the NBA and Major League Baseball. If there are any players that are uncomfortable participating, all they have to say is that they're opting out and they're not playing. They don't have to give reason. They don't really have to go into any kind of detail at all. All they got to say is, I'm not playing. Now, we've seen different reports from different media sources on what the feeling is amongst the players. We saw Eric Angles of Sportsnet, who largely covers the Montreal Canadiens, indicate that he's talked to several players who felt there was quite a large number. He indicated almost 3/4 of players who were either not wanting to or hesitant to return, and that there's a lot of talk going on that the players being represented by the PA, that they weren't really overly happy. It was felt like they were kind of kept in the dark with a lot of the stuff going on, negotiations, etc. But then we've heard a lot of comments from a lot of other players indicating that they're anxious to get back at it. So I don't really know what it is exactly, where the truth is. It's hard to say, but many believe that when the votes come in for this return to play, the CBA and everything, it is expected to pass. But many feel that it's likely not going to be a very unanimous vote, that it could be like a 60-40 split with a 40% opposition, but obviously majority vote in that case wins now. So we'll have to see if there's any kind of divide amongst the players or how that all shakes out, but there's certainly some players being more vocal about their concerns than others. One of the other big issues we've been talking about over the last little while is signing bonuses as well, because today being July 1st, many NHL players have it built into their contract that they have a portion of their wages paid in signing bonuses and a portion paid in salary. Some of them have a ton of bonus money paid, and a lot of that is due on July the 1st. Now, there's some contracts that are structured a little bit differently. Some get their signing bonus in May, some in September. It's not all the same, but for the bulk of it, a lot of it is due on July the 1st. There was a lot of talk whether or not they were going to be paid or pushed back or how that was going to work, and there was no agreement reached to push it back or extend it, so all bonuses due on July the 1st today were indeed paid or will be paid. I think with the holiday being in Canada on July 1st in Canada Day, I think sometimes players, especially on the Canadian teams, only receive their money within a few days afterwards, but regardless, they're being paid on time. A lot of it, for example, like the Toronto Maple Leafs have a ton of money. I think I calculated it was over $55 million. It's probably a little bit more than that, but just on the bigger contracts like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner combined, I think it was about $29 million. You throw in John Tavares, that puts him up over 40. Jake Muzzin has a big signing bonus due as well. Freddie Anderson, I think, has around $4 million. So that puts him up well over $50 million right there. And I think William Nylander has a signing bonus around $3.5 or $4 million as well. I'm just kind of going off memory here, but they had a ton of it. Obviously, MLSE can afford that. They have a very deep pockets, but certainly there's some NHL teams that are not so fortunate that way and would certainly have trouble dishing out a lot of money with no revenues coming in right now. Now, another big item in the CBA as well, which is kind of favors the owners a bit, is there's going to be some limitations on signing bonuses moving forward. Now, currently, right now, we see teams like I just mentioned, like Toronto, as a deep pocket, big market team who can afford to do it, have a lot of front-loaded contracts with a lot of signing bonus money entailed, so players get paid up front. Certainly makes a big impact on how they get paid. And obviously, some smaller market teams who can't afford to dish out that much money at one time struggle to offer that. That's just like the big part of the reason we saw Marc Bergevin in Montreal offer sheet Sebastian Aho in Carolina last year. Not to say that they wouldn't offer a similar amount of money, but the structure was the big way that he thought that they would have an advantage because they'd have the deeper pockets to pay out the bonuses, where he knew owner Tom Dundon wasn't fond of that. So obviously, like I said, big market teams do have an advantage that way, but that will be going away. Obviously, the NHL is going to be structuring it so that there's a limitation on how much money can be paid out in bonuses. I don't know the exact figure on that. That wasn't released. There's also going to be less disparity from year to year on the fluctuation from bonuses and salary, so that's a little bit more consistent throughout the term of the contract. That doesn't surprise me at all that that's something that will be negotiated. I mean, obviously, it's kind of funny in a way because the owners and the general managers negotiating these contracts on their side obviously have to agree to this, but then over time they find an opportunity to kind of take it away. But it's a loophole that certainly a lot of agents have worked in favor to get their clients better deals, and obviously players in bigger market cities are taking advantage of that as well, and that is going to change. But I think overall, to keep the level playing field across the league, I do think overall that is a good idea. Right now, any players arriving back to their NHL cities on a commercial flight will have to isolate for 7 days before going to any kind of training camp or Phase 2, which is where we're at right now. Phase 3 and NHL training camps are set to open for July the 13th. We've seen numerous reports. Sportsnet is reporting that to be factual right now, so I guess we'll have to see when the NHL confirms that. But July the 13th as an actual training camp date right now will be Phase 3, and then Phase 4 will be when they go to their hub cities. They're supposed to get one exhibition game, and then they start the qualifying round and kind of go from there. But on one other big stumbling point that could be, difficult to get them all the way to getting this playoffs started and season completed would be each of these NHL teams getting through their training camps in their own individual cities. Obviously, there's all kinds of hot spots right now in the United States with COVID-19 cases, and some of those teams in those areas might struggle to get through a 2-week training camp without actually, having anything happen for an outbreak. I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't want to see that happen for everybody's safety, of course, but it is going to be a challenge. We already saw a scenario where Tampa had to close their facilities for a few days because of some positive cases. So hopefully that is not something that happens, but it is another obstacle that all these cities and the NHL teams have to overcome. It is believed that Phase 3 and Phase 4 protocols have been agreed to as well. It doesn't seem to be too big of a stumbling block right now to get this deal completed, but obviously a lot of these fine details are being ironed out, and then from there it's going to go to a full NHLPA and NHL Board of Governors vote, which we're believing could take place as early as Friday or Saturday, and it is possible before the end of the weekend things could be ratified and confirmed here and have all this information released, like I said, going into a July 13th training camp. And then from there, that's a 2-week period. By the time NHL teams get to their hub cities and actually play a game that matters, we're looking at right around July the 30th, 31st range. And obviously that'll take us through August and September, with the Stanley Cup likely being awarded, if everything goes well, sometime around the end of September, 1st of October. So hopefully we'll have more information to confirm all of this. Wouldn't be shocked if the NHL actually makes some sort of update here, even while I'm recording, but I don't think it'll come that quick. There could be more information out later this evening, but it wouldn't be shocked here if the NHL doesn't make an official announcement here for another day or two. It's like every day we're hearing that it could be today, could be tomorrow. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But according to the insiders, this is the latest information, and a lot of it seems to be confirmed. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some other things to discuss today, including the Buffalo Sabres. Now, of course, this is just speculation on my part, but we did get confirmation just in the last couple of hours that the Carolina Hurricanes were parting ways with executive Rick Dudley. Now, of course, with the Sabres going through everything that they've gone through with their mass firing and Kevin Adams being a very inexperienced general manager, of course, he's worked as an assistant coach. He's worked a lot on the business side of hockey, but he's really lacking in that area. And personally, I think he should have a senior advisor, and somebody like Rick Dudley, who's got a ton of experience and worked in a variety of NHL executive jobs, would be a great addition. Of course, he lives in that area as well, so it's not a big transition for him from a personal level. Obviously, he'd worked with the Hurricanes in the last number of years, and I think he'd be a great addition. So we got confirmation now that his contract is up with Carolina and he's not returning there, so he's officially, I guess, on the market if he's looking for work here. But he's one of the first guys that came to mind when everything kind of first went down in Buffalo that I thought would be a good executive advisor for Adams. So I guess we'll see if there's anything more to that. But obviously, he is no longer with the Canes. That much we do know for sure. I also want to take a look at some NHL draft rumors as well. There's been a lot of talk about the draft in the last few days. Of course, Friday night, we had the NHL Draft Lottery. I completed a mock draft the next day. I know many other NHL YouTubers did as well as some mainstream media kind of indicating where they think players are going to go. And there's been a lot of talk. For the most part, Lafreniere and Byfield have been a consensus number 1, number 2 selections. But there seems to be right now a lot of information floating around that the LA Kings with the number 2 overall selection might actually be leaning towards selecting German-born forward Tim Stutzle. Now, Stutzle and Byfield are kind of the consensus number 2, 3 picks by majority of NHL scouting services. But if you look around the last batch of NHL player rankings that were put out right before the draft lottery, many had Stutzle ranked as number 2. If you look at Bob McKenzie's rankings of TSN, of course, his rankings, as I mentioned before, are kind of based on a general consensus of about 10 NHL executives and scouts that he talks to. So Bob McKenzie gets a variety of information from a lot of different scouts and kind of puts the general consensus together. It's not just his own opinion, and Stutzle was ranked number 2, and we've seen this in other places as well. Of course, there's been some other information that's kind of indicated here about why the Kings might lean that way. Now, for me, the LA Kings have a lot of great center prospects as well, so I can understand the possibility of passing on Byfield. Stutzle could be a center, but he might be more of an NHL winger. Tremendously gifted offensive forward, can play with a lot of pace, a lot of offense. Now, one other connection as well that might lean the Kings more likely to take Stutzle over Byfield is the fact that one of their assistant coaches, it was Marco Sturm, who is a German-born former NHL player, been with the Kings as an assistant coach, and many believe will be the next head coach of the Los Angeles Kings whenever the time comes for them to move on from head coach Todd McLellan. Of course, McClellan's been there for not too long right now, so it's hard to say when that will be. But Sturm is certainly one of those guys in the NHL ranks that are kind of considered one of the up-and-coming potential future head coaches. And I know from a Kings perspective, I think they really value him a lot, and I can see him being the next coach. I think that does make a lot of sense. And it's believed that he absolutely loves Tim Stutzle and sees him as being a big part of the Kings' future. So that might have a lot of weight going in with Kings management, and Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille obviously value his opinion quite substantially, and I very well could lean them towards taking Stutzle. And of course, it's not just Marco Sturm. Many NHL scouts do view him as being the number 2 best prospect around the NHL. So if that were to be the case and they were to select Stutzle at the number 2 overall selection, that would mean Ottawa at number 3 would have Quinton Byfield kind of fall to them, which to me would be a terrific prize. If you look at around the fact that Ottawa did not win the draft lottery, and I know many Sens fans might have been disappointed in that, but the fact that they could probably get Byfield at number 3 would be a tremendous gift, really. Not to take anything away from Stutzle, but Byfield to me is just a slightly better prospect. He's that big, dominating number 1 center iceman that many teams would love to have. If you think about the possibility of Byfield in LA, it makes a lot of sense as well. Even though they have a lot of great center prospects, for him to learn from a guy like Anze Kopitar and really develop into being like the next Anze Kopitar around the league and in LA would be absolutely huge for them. But like I said, they have many other great prospects that they might be banking on to play that role down in the future here. So obviously that would be huge for Ottawa. And at Detroit at number 4, then you get Ottawa again at number 5. And there's a lot of talk that the main prospect that Detroit would have their eye on would be Cole Perfetti, and that comes from Sportsnet's Sam Cosentino. I know he started talking with that already even right after the draft lottery took place on the draft lottery show after the picks were announced with Ron McLean and Elliot Friedman, which I found very interesting at the time. I wasn't really sure, kind of give it some thought, but obviously like he feels the connection there. Perfetti playing in Saginaw. He's mentored by Michigan NHL player Ryan Kessler. Of course, Kessler's very much likely retired, but still there's a connection between him and the franchise being so close by, and that he feels that that is the guy that Detroit will want. Now, Perfetti's a terrific offensively gifted prospect, a really smart hockey player. He's going to go in the top 10. He should have a pretty solid career. The big knock on him, though, is his skating is not quite quick enough, doesn't get around the ice as well as some of the other prospect, but he has some other intangibles that you just can't teach, like his hockey sense. He's got a great shot. There's just a lot of other great aspects about how he thinks the game, and Cosentino really feels that he is Detroit's player. So again, of Cosentino, who I have a lot of respect for as being one of the top guys that knows these junior players inside and out and spends his whole year going watching his junior hockey games and being a great analyst for junior hockey, then obviously that again could open up the door for Ottawa with their number 5 pick to have a guy like Marco Rossi or Jamie Drysdale available to them in that slot. I mean, it'd be difficult to say who they pick. I don't really think you can go wrong with either one. Imagine if the Senators walked away with Byfield and Rossi. They could have their number 1, number 2 center spots locked up for many years to come. They do have some other interesting center prospects already in the organization. But as I mentioned before during our mock draft, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Senators focus on the center position, because I'm just not convinced that the center prospects they have currently will work out to be that good in that position, and that these guys are likely going to be stronger players, and they might be wise to really solidify that down the middle to have that option covered for a long, long time. But of course, you go with Drysdale. You've already got Thomas Chabot, Eric Brandstrom, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Christian Verlanen, Lassie Thompson. They have a lot of great defensive prospects in the system already. Not to say that Drysdale wouldn't be right up there. Personally, I think he could be close to a Thomas Chabot longer term. So really, it's not a bad problem to have. But, I guess you got to decide on who you want. But based on these draft rumors, it just seems like the Kings and the wing selections might really benefit Ottawa being able to get some of the top 2 center prospects in this draft. So let me know your thoughts on who these teams should take, and let me know your thoughts on the NHL return to play information discussed today as well. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.